Hello, I'm Tony, and welcome to the Tony Shap Show. Well, hello, everybody. Welcome back. This week we have a special guest. I am super pumped to have him on the show. I can't wait for you to hear about who he is, where he's been, how he got started, where he is today, and where he's going. David, take a quick second to say hello to everyone.
Hi, everyone.
Right. It's a pleasure to have you on this show. As you know, so people are listening to this, whether it's you're listening to this brand new in 2021, if they're listening to this now, 10 years from now, 5 years from now. So a lot of things that we're going to talk about, I want it to have a long shelf life. So if it's something that works today, and they're listening to this in 2030, who knows, they might be listening to that and something that can have some solid takeaways. So let's start off with a one word open. So if you could share with the audience, what is your one word open, that you could describe how you're feeling right now, that would be great.
I'm excited.
I love it. Very good. So tell us about your business, what you're all about, so people could be on the same page with you and learn more about who you guys are, what you guys are all about.
Sure. I was a serial entrepreneur for most of my life. I started 7 ventures and exited 6 of them successfully. There's one I don't talk about much, but after that, I tried to retire and failed at that. And so I started doing angel investing and did around 17 angel investments, working very closely with those companies, very hands-on, full-time. And then the success from some of those investments led to the start of my first venture fund. It was a $12 million early stage seed fund. We invest in SaaS-based software companies, B2B SaaS here in the Triangle, North Carolina. And the success of that fund led to a second fund, which was a $31 million fund, and then a sidecar. And this year we'll probably raise our 3rd fund. And so nothing's too early for us. We invest pre-revenue companies. We like businesses that solve real technology that solves real business problems. It doesn't have to be super deep technology, but it has to solve a real pressing problem and have a demonstrable ROI, something that we can sell to corporations and build a recurring revenue stream.
Excellent. If you could share with the audience as they're listening to this or watching this on YouTube, share with us a recent win that you've had in business context that's close to you. And, when you experienced that win and put on the board, so to speak, what was your takeaway from it?
Yeah. Well, one of my angel investments last year was sold. I invested $100,000 in an early startup that archived social media so that government entities can respond to Freedom of Information Acts by tracking all the changes and getting snapshots of their social media. And that company was acquired last year, in the $60 million range. And so that 100K, generated over a $3 million return for me. So that was definitely a good win last year.
Wonderful. How about on the opposite side of that? I know we don't like to talk about it, but can you share something that was not so significant?
We do early stage. We do really early stage investing. So there's a lot of failures in early stage investing.
Yeah. Got it.
And it's loss. And that's typically 100% loss. SaaS-based outcomes are pretty binary. They do well, are they 100% loss? There's, pretty much if you get out there and you discover that your thesis just doesn't work, it's usually not the technology that lets us down. That's just a function of time and money. It's usually the entrepreneur. You suddenly discover that someone has a good idea, but they can't really execute on that idea. And too much money goes in, too late to pivot, those kind of things where it's just not salvageable.
Right. And how do you find people to invest in? Do they come to you, or do you find them, or do they find you?
They find me. I wrote a book on entrepreneurship called The Startup Hacks, and a lot of people contact me after reading the book. Around in North Carolina, I'm kind of a well-known entrepreneur and spent a lot of time helping. I spent a few years just volunteering my time helping startups and working with the accelerators. And so people know me here. And we like to say in the North Carolina area, there's not really any SaaS-based startup that
Hmm.
doesn't come and talk to us. We're very high profile, speaking at conferences. We're on a bunch of grant committees. We're very involved with the universities and been a real advocate for getting early stage funding to entrepreneurs.
Got it. Got it. And what would be your best advice if you could, tell, um, if you had like just one tip you could give to an entrepreneur that's starting out, there's pre-revenue, like someone that you would typically work with. If you could only give them one advice, David, what would that one advice be?
Well, for our types of companies, just don't write any software until you've line up revenue. It's a real catharsis to go out and say, hey, if we had software that did X and we think it solves this business problem, and here's the ROI, would you buy it? What would you pay for it? You would. Well, then would you be a beta customer for us? And if you can sign them up, I mean, that's the best due diligence you'll ever do, is just signing up customers. You don't have to have a product to sign up customers for beta. Everyone loves being on the cutting edge of technology and being, helping to shape the direction of some new technology. So I think that, I think that's the thing. The biggest mistake we see is people just write a lot of software before they really know what the problem is. And every industry has its nuances and substitutes. And so, you just have to make sure that you do a lot more research than coding early on.
Awesome. I can't wait to take a look at your book as well myself, and then I'll definitely put in show notes for others to find out more about it as well. So let's go back to your early stage. I know you've been doing this for a long time. What was are you able to, at a high level, speak to your very first memorable investment that you ever made?
Well, I mean, my own companies were my first investments. I was pretty much always the biggest investor in my companies, and it's it's scary. I one of the things I say in my book is you raise a little pot of money against an idea, an unproven thesis, and then you try like hell to prove it out before you run out of money. And it's just like jumping out of an airplane without a parachute. You just have a bag of really ambitious silkworms, and you're knitting all the way to the ground. So it's a rush, but I like that feeling of, I had to be a little bit afraid every morning because it got me going. I had to have something hanging in the balance that was uncertain. Imagine playing a video game where you just won easily every time. How long would that keep your interest? There has to be that fear of failure to make it a real competition and to make it a game worthy of you. And so that's been and some people thrive on that, and other people it would make them absolutely crazy. And so you just have to figure out which one are you.
Yeah. Thanks for putting that in perspective, because I know a lot of people are kind of going through that day to day, but you kind of hit the nail right on the head when you put it in perspective for a lot of them. I can't imagine someone going through a day, and then if they're listening to this, they go, holy cow, David just nailed it right there. That's exactly what I'm doing. It's kind of like gambling, right? You got to have skin in the game. But if you won all the time, then it's not a big deal. So we got to learn from our failures, and it's not a failure if you learn from it.
Well, it's funny. One of the biggest criticisms of my book is that's been the first chapter, talking people out of being an entrepreneur. And that was my hiring philosophy as well. If I could talk you out of the job, you weren't the right person for it. And so the first chapter is, are you really an entrepreneur? Just because you're smart and tenacious it doesn't mean you're an entrepreneur, because if it doesn't make you happy, no matter how much money you make, you're a failure. And so, you got to ask yourself, is that the personality? The entrepreneur's inbox is never done. There's always more you could and should be doing. And do you like the idea of having everything in its place and a nice procedure and going home at the end of the day with everything checked off? Or do you like opportunities flying all around with endless possibilities and risk, that's the predictable is nice in some ways, but it's certainly not an adventure. And so it's just what makes you, what excites you, and what makes you want to get up and go.
That's really powerful that you share with us. And when you were mentioning that, I couldn't help not to think about the time I used to be an EO, YPO, as I'm sure you're familiar with. And we used to coin the phrase, as entrepreneurs, we're CEOs in a different context that you've probably heard a lot. And there's been books written about it. The acronym of CEO for all of us entrepreneurs is Chief Everything Officer, right? So, and you're doing it day in, day out.
Sure.
So I have a flip question for you. So as you're out there, you're doing your speaking gigs and your keynotes and you're giving presentations and you're giving back to the community and people are asking you questions. David, what is that one question that you wish more people would ask you in business context that, typically nobody asks you? So what would that be that you would like for people to ask that you would consider a powerful question to ask you?
Well, I mean, I think I've already touched on that. It's just, everyone comes to me asking, is this a good business idea? Or, hey, we're having this problem with the business. How can we pivot or have a different go-to-market strategy? But a lot of times people need to, first of all, ask themselves, is this what's going to make me happy? Am I really going to enjoy doing this? Back when I was coming along, it was very uncool to be an entrepreneur. If you told your parents you want to be an entrepreneur, it's like saying, I want to be a rock star. They're like, put it out of your mind. You're going to go work for IBM, but today it's cool to be an entrepreneur. Entrepreneurship is one of the fastest growing academic, programs at most of the universities today. And there's clubs and support groups and grant money and accelerators, and it's almost too cool. And I think sometimes we're talking people into being entrepreneurs who really aren't entrepreneurs. And I think that it just sets them up. I think a lot of companies fail, not because it's a bad idea, it's just not making the entrepreneur happy. And if you're not happy and challenged by what you're doing, then it's just sucking the life out of you every day. And now that's a good reason to become an entrepreneur too, if your job is sucking the life out of you every day. But it's just ask yourself, what challenges me, what makes me happy, and am I going, is that what's right for me? So I think the best question you can be asked is, hey, am I right for this venture? Not, is this the right venture? Yeah.
Awesome. Well said. So how could our audience get a hold of you, or how can they find out more information about you and what you do and all that good stuff?
Sure. I mean, our website's cofounderscapital.com, and we have our team up there and our portfolio companies, a lot of resources for startups, contract templates, resources. There's, I guess, dozens of articles and interviews and things, anything we could find that we thought would help entrepreneurs. I'm David at cofounderscapital.com. Now, it's important to say because we are a early stage seed fund, so our typical investments are $1 million or less in the first round, and so early stage ventures, B2B, SaaS. We prefer enterprise software, and we're kind of East Coast, North Carolina kind of area centric. We tend to not do deals on the West Coast, and too far away from us. So that's kind of our thesis. And if anybody fits within that fund thesis, we're happy to talk to them and help them and give them advice. And if we see them acting on that, and sometimes that advice will turn into to an investment.
Awesome. Thanks for making that available for the audience. And the final question, one word close. What's that one word that you could close with that describes how you're feeling now?
How I'm feeling now. I'm still excited. Our companies have, weathered the pandemic really well. It's great having recurring revenue. And a lot of them have pivoted. They right-sized their companies, and they're starting to come back strong now. And even though the pandemic is still surging, we found a lot of that demand didn't go away. It just kind of got pent up. And now people are going, well, I have to do business at some point, and they're starting to buy again and engage and put out RFPs. And so it's super excited about a bunch of our companies, and this is going to be a real breakout year for some of them.
Awesome. Thanks again for coming on to the show. I wanted to personally say thank you on behalf of me and also on behalf of the audience who's listening. Thanks again. And I can't wait to have you here sometime in the future.
Awesome. Thanks, Tony.
Thanks. And there you go. I hope you enjoyed it, and great to have you, and thanks for listening. And don't forget to subscribe and stay tuned for the next episode. Till next time, onwards and upwards.